a lot of times creative people, filmmakers, etc., they tend to not have that second part of their brain that it's good at financial.
I've noticed that. I
matters.
teach online for, besides my clients, who mostly are totally oriented towards writing and maybe producing and directing. I noticed that because I've been teaching online for UCLA since really probably they started doing this around 2004, 2005. And I've noticed that all of my students are adults. They're old, they're not undergraduates or anything like that. They're all out working, and but yet I still have people say to me, I can't do math. And I'm going, this is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, But what can I say? I have the feeling that after I left high school, they stopped teaching ratios.
It does seem like that, doesn't it?
It's
a little discouraging, yes.
I know.
So what are the most common kind of pitfalls for a filmmaker like that doesn't have this financial knowledge?
I think the first thing is to understand where investors are coming from, because I've really tried to make. I now have a whole course posted online that goes with the book, and I've tried to make that part of it the math, which is really more common sense because I have never been a math wizard. I've done projections for large companies and healthcare and all that before I got into film for a number of years. But it's not that hard. But it's what they need to understand what the investor is looking for, and they always want to know. Even when people are investing in documentaries, they always want to know, well, what could happen with this film, and why, are you saying it will happen this way? So they do have to try and have that financial part in it, because that's really important to people who are putting up money.
Absolutely. And the filmmaker has to know their script. I mean, this goes without saying, but they need to know their script intimately.
Well, when I'm doing a fairly short seminar and I can't go through everything in the business plan in total detail, to me the most important thing is the synopsis, because you're talking to investors, so I feel that you have to give them the storyline. Not it was a dark and stormy night type of thing, but, the storyline, 1, 2, 3, 4 plot points, and the ending, as opposed to, and then the strange thing happened, because, this is not for IMDb, it's for the investor. And then they have to really understand the market for their film.
When you're going after investors, is it important to go after the investors that would be your ideal audience for your movie?
It certainly, if you do have a film that fits a certain group that is going to like something, if you have racing cars in it, or it's about Buddhism or anything, baseball, football. Right now, I do have a couple of clients with football films, and fortunately, they've worked a lot before they came to me in terms of trying to meet people and networking and all that. So the first people they tried to network with were people who are in football, not just players particularly, but management, whoever. Certainly, those might be the first people to invest in a film like that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is one of the biggest things, and of course something I love because they often work so well, are relatively low budget horror films. So you can't really say who out there is going to like horror. It's just something you have to go and look for investors. But what you have to realize is that not every low-budget horror film does well, and that there are so many out there, and there is such a big market for them, who go to them are very picky. And so you have to make the best little horror film you ever could.
Years ago, I spent time with a salesman who was a distant kind of friend of mine, but he would constantly talk about his sales pitch. He was in the used car business. So maybe it's a little bit different, but he always said sell the sizzle, not the steak. Which I
no,
guess is
in
a
this
common
case, I'm selling. Yeah, well, I can sell the sizzle and not be in trouble, but you do have to be selling the steak. I feel in this case.
Yeah.
You have to be really careful when you do a business plan, because I just had a 2-hour conversation yesterday with a client of mine who has investors, but he hasn't finished, and he's worried about this, that, and the other thing. It's a very litigious. People sue. I don't care if they're relatives. I've had clients who, before they came to me, had made a film, and their relatives had sued them over the film or something. So you have to be very careful when you write a business plan, even though it's a marketing document and not a legal document like the PPM, the offering that you give, that the attorney writes, that you have investors before you can take money from them and have an agreement and all that in it. Right. It's still, you have to be careful what you say, so you can't put in a wish list of actors, that sort of thing. And you really want to be very clear. That's why I say you want to put in a synopsis that has all the plot points, but hopefully within 1 page, something like that, because you don't want to say anything that comes back to haunt you later, that they can say, well, you said this and it wasn't true. There's a line between, it is a business document, and I know I used to, when I first started, I had mostly male clients, because women would not get forward themselves, even if they were the screenwriter, director, and all that. But that's changed a lot over the years. But someone would give it to his wife to read, and she would say, he'd come back and say, well, my wife said it was boring. I go, it's a business document. It's not a novel, So you can see, in the sample business plan, it's fairly straightforward. About what I'm saying. There are some things where you can really have some sizzle, like the log line in the executive summary, where you make it sound, you kind of want to put the interest factor in, that sort of thing. But it basically is a business document, and I understand what he was saying, but I feel in this case it's not supposed to be that entertaining. It's really supposed to just say, this is what it is, this is how the business works, this is the market that these are films that are in the same kind of genre, that sort of thing, that have done well, and these are my target markets of people who are likely to come the first couple of weeks to see the film. And there's data out there. There's so much stuff that's free now, in terms of who goes to movies and that sort of thing, and quotes and all that kind of thing. The Internet is great, because when I first started, you had to go to something that most people haven't heard of, a library, and try to find stuff.
Where are those anymore?
I don't know. Well, in universities they do have them, but anyway.
God bless universities. Yes.
Yeah. So really, it really is a factual document.
So a lot of times the independent filmmaker, the ones that are just starting out, what have you, they'll have to search for investors that haven't necessarily put their money in movies before.
Right.
They're kind of intrigued by the idea,
right.
But they don't understand what that involves. So what do you have to know to kind of impart to them about the business?
Well, again, those the same things that you put in a business plan. You have to explain. First of all, you're talking about who you are, and usually it's not a big company, although it could be. Who's involved on the production team, that sort of thing, and then you have your synopsis of the film. So you want to give a short description of the industry, which is really easy in terms of you can copy that, except you have to update a couple of numbers, that sort of thing. You want to describe how it works and what's the difference between studio films and independent films. And a lot of that, again, has to do with because studios now they've made it kind of easier to describe because they're obsessed with making these $250 million films,
right.
That, will not all make money, and they bring them out the same week, and you can see what happens. But independent films have a better payback for investors. The filmmaker has the independence to make the film that he feels is better and that he designed in the first place and told the investors he was going to make. There's nobody else to say, no, we want to do this instead. Mm-hmm. So it's depending on your budget, and independent films now can be very high in budget, but depending on your budget, then you can see from, again, so much information on the internet, how films have done at different budgets and what kind of actors you need to have in them, that sort of thing, and give an overview again of what the markets are for these films, who's gone to films that are the same type of film, which is right. Not just having, say, a horror film, because now one of the things I've done several of in the past year have been young adult supernatural faith-based films. So most films have multiple genres, which is great because they can reach multiple audiences. Yeah.
Tell me, because we're living in an age now with the digital technology, and it's kind of democratized the process of making movies. How has that? How has the financial and approaching the investors and that whole aspect of it evolved in that process?
Yeah, that really depends. One of the problems. There's two things. One, if you're going to go to other people for the money, and you're going to say, here are comparative films that are within some rational budget range, and how they've done, and therefore I'm making this projection, that data only comes for theatrical films. Therefore, you really have to know you're still going to have to be able to use the standard distribution system to start with to get your film out. You can make better films for less money, but you have to understand how this film is going to transfer to look on the big screen. And that's where I've gone to Sundance for like 27 years. And that's where I see a lot of problems, and that people, I always said that, I once said to somebody, from Kodak, I said that the two technical things I really know are about, transferring a film is sound and lighting. She said that's still all you need to know, because those are the two things where people don't take into consideration when they're filming with really inexpensive equipment how this is going to look, or whether or not the distributor is going to pick it up, because they don't want to put a lot of money into transferring it to look better.
Yeah.
So, and I know there are some films that come out where they say, well, it only cost us $30,000 to make, but then in talking to studios that may have picked up, I won't name any, they'll say, yes, but you can figure $300,000 to $500,000 before we could put that in a theater.
Right, exactly.
That kind of thing. So you still have to, you have to know your equipment. You have to, a lot of people say, well, there's no reason to go to film school. One reason to go to film school that I've found is to learn how to make a film. Because it's another thing to be able to write a great script, but if you are going to be the producer or director, you need to know how to make a good film. And so you don't have to go to a 4-year school for that, but I think you need to know that.
Do you, because it's the age-old argument for an artist, where does how do you raise the money and realistically budget your film without sacrificing the art? Do you recommend, before you approach investors, that you be as brutal with your script as you can in terms of cost cutting?
Yes, but only to a certain point. You don't want to cut it what I would call to the bone, so that you always have to have that extra money in there, and that brings up another skill, which is knowing how to budget a film. Now, there are so many, independent people around that work in budgeting that it's not that hard to find somebody who's reasonably priced to do a budget for you. But you have to make sure that you understand what everything is going to cost, and then put in a little extra for unexpected things that may happen. I had I did a business plan for a documentary where they were moving an entire house from Civil War era. So this was an amazing event anyway, just to watch on the screen. But what happened was they started moving the house because they had to leave where the house was, but the place they were going to put it suddenly wasn't available for 6 months, and they had to park the mansion. So,
wow.
There are all these kinds of things that can come up. Or you're going to film somewhere and suddenly you have 3 days of rain and you can't do it. Whatever it is, you have to budget carefully, but not budget so low that you've hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to say where that number is, but it's really understanding everything that's involved in putting together the budget.
Along with that budget, do you include the marketing and such that follows the production of the film?
Not unless you're planning on doing it. If you're probably going to have a distributor.
Okay.
And the distributor is going to do, that P&A, that spend. There's so much that's free on the internet. I mean, with social networking, when we did the Blair Witch Project, they created social networking for themselves not knowing what it was because this didn't exist. They just went into different websites and sent people to their website and all that sort of thing. And, the social networking that exists now is amazing. Sometimes annoying when you're on them, but amazing that you can get information out to a lot of people in different ways. And organizations, once you have a film that's going to come out, if there are organizations whose members would be interested in the type of film you have, you can email them, send them printed material, whatever it is. So there's a lot of things you can do that don't cost money. But I am not in favor of people putting up their own print and ad money.
Even the process of submitting to festivals and such.
But that's it can be, but it's like $35 here, $50, and then you also want to think about when you're going to a fest. Now that should be included in the budget. But you also want to think, I just noticed today there was an article, I think it's in IndieWire, about, are all these festivals real or are they all worthwhile, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You really want to look at, when you're to a festival, who goes to it? Do distributors go to it? Do you just want to put your film in a festival so you can say your film was in a festival? Because if you're going to pay money, and without a box helps with all that sort of thing. If you're going to do that, think about, what's the festival like? We all know that Sundance is a very edgy it's for edgy movies, whether they're comedy or horror or whatever they are. On the other hand, there are other festivals that are good for more inspirational type of films, that sort of thing. But you also need to try and know if people go there who are likely to pick up your film, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Would you recommend bringing in an attorney, and when would you recommend that happening? I know that I do write business plans for people who don't have an attorney yet, and I'm not in favor of that, but I can't stop them.
you're going to need, unless you're getting all the money from one person, and most people are not doing that, you're going to need what they call an offering, which has all this attorney stuff, and then basically it says how the money's going to be split, and it has subscription documents on it, because most people are going to do a limited partnership or a limited liability offering where you have, 10, 20, 30 investors, that sort of thing in the film. The best thing to do is to try to do these two things at the same time, because I've seen it happen that people go and get an investor all excited about their movie because they have a business plan, but then they have to go back and get the offering, and by the time they've done that and get back to the investor, sometimes the investor has done other things with the money. So that's a kind of point of sale thing that's really important. You get them while they're hot. Because in talking to them, that's really the selling part. That's really the sizzle. I don't want too much sizzle on the printed page, but when you're speaking to an investor, that's when you get, excited about the film and you can really sell it and that sort of thing. And if they're really interested and say, I want to do it, you don't want to let them cool off. So I think you need to bring in an attorney who's used to doing those kinds of things. Not all attorneys do everything. I would say certainly in LA and New York, 90% of the attorneys do contracts, which is fine. They don't know they're not used to doing offerings, and a lot of them aren't used to negotiating distribution deals. So you don't necessarily only have one attorney through the whole thing. You'll have one attorney that you might start with if you're trying to attach people while you're, before you're going to go out and try to raise money for the film, that sort of thing, who's your kind of ongoing everyday attorney. But then you might have to have a different attorney for the offering and even another attorney if you're going to be negotiating a distribution deal.
Yeah. And I like how you talked about the reserving the sizzle for your presentation, because I think that they do need to feel that passion from you. And my last question for you is about passion. With what you do when you advise clients and you teach and various things, what is most fulfilling about this for you, this process?
I just seeing people creating these different things. I mean, there are a lot of people that come to me and I go, are you kidding? And I try to talk them out of it. Otherwise I'd be rich. No, I actually try to convince them not to hire me without rejecting them, because I know they're so far out of, this woman called me up last week and said that so-and-so had recommended her, and she'd never made a film before, and she wasn't kidding. She has a $150 million film. And I said, get an attorney and sell your script to a studio. But I want to make the film. Well, what can I tell you? I mean, but I think that it really is the excitement of seeing all this creativity, because as much as I've done a lot of business plans, each one in some way is new to me. Even if I've done, I kid people when I'm doing seminars, and I say, because everybody knows that I wrote the business plan for the Blair Witch Project, and I've done so many, low-budget horror film business plans, I said I could do them in my sleep, but I'm still going to charge you the same rate. But they're all different, and everything has something to it. And so I think, to me, it's that I enjoyed my whole career that I did was going someplace where they had never done anything and actually creating these strategic planning things that I do, which when I started I had never done. I was not a big math major. I just liked the idea of, wow, how would this work, and why would people buy this? And so when I started in independent film, there was supposedly not going to be any, so I created the format that I have based on how I saw the film business working and going to Sundance for a couple of years and kind of learning from people how everything worked, which was really easy to do, and more, it was easier, I'll say, to do because there were fewer people and they were more talkative at the time. So just to see the difference, because I was used to doing business plans, but how would this work if it were film? And so that's been my whole life, is in a sense, is creating that. And actually, even though I'm kind of this nuts and bolts person when I'm writing business plans, people have actually brought me to their investor meetings to be the closer, because I can do that closing selling pitch too. So I think I'm kind of evenly balanced in right and left brain. So this is like the perfect area to be in.